Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, we're doing another movie bracket. I'm here with the same panel, but thanks to COVID-19, we're all doing this remotely. You know how this format goes. We've got 32 movies here. They're all going to go head to head, just like our A24 movie bracket. But this time, we're not trying to determine the best film of a studio. We're trying to determine the best sci-fi movie of all time. At the very beginning, we got Planet of the Apes versus Alien.
This is tough. Like, we're starting out with kind of two movies that are probably in my top 10 sci-fi movies, my
I
personal
feel like
favorite.
both of these movies are absolutely just top 10 sci-fi movies, period.
And I think Planet of the Apes has done so much for just the sci-fi genre in general compared to Alien, which has still done a lot, but Planet of the Apes was just a massive leap forward for that genre.
I don't think there's an Alien sequel that's anywhere near as good as the first Alien movie. And I think Planet of the Apes is a franchise that continues to impress me.
A movie released when it did, I would not expect to be this good.
First round, Planet of the Apes is going to be moving on. All right, so we're moving on. The next round in this bracket, we've got Ex Machina
Oh,
versus
no.
Her.
Here it comes.
With the third act of Her, you kind of get this feeling of there's probably a lot of people in the same situation as our main character here. Whereas Ex Machina feels like this very within these four walls is the entire narrative until like the last shot of the movie.
Ex Machina is trying to tell a larger story, or at least one with grander implications in a smaller space. Her tells a more personal story in a more realistic setting, just like everyday life.
Her kind of played it as what could seem as a long distance relationship if you just walked in the middle of the movie, just someone talking to like their significant other on the phone rather than someone literally talking to a robot. It's a completely, like you said, it's a lot more believable.
But I like the cast of Ex Machina as a whole a lot better than Her.
I mean, if we're sleeping on the Her cast, need I remind you, Chris Pratt, Amy Adams, Joaquin Phoenix, and
Yeah, I was
Scarlett
about to
Johansson
say.
are all in this film. I mean, sure, you've got Domhnall Gleeson and Alicia
Oscar
Vikander and Oscar Isaac, but I mean, in terms of Ex Machina, I feel like Oscar Isaac carries that cast on his shoulders.
I like Her a lot. I don't mind Her moving on.
All right, well, I made this whole video just so I could get Josh on record saying that Ex Machina is not the greatest sci-fi film of the last decade.
Damn.
Well, to be fair, I never looked at Her as a sci-fi movie until you put it on the list.
We got Blade Runner versus A Ghost in the Shell. These are two of my all-time favorite sci-fi movies, and they're going head-to-head in the first round.
Blade Runner.
Now it's time for the Trekkies to hate us all. We've got Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan up against Star Wars III: Revenge of the Sith.
So when Wrath of Khan came in, it was like, yeah, we could finally have a theatrical release Star Trek content that everybody can enjoy, not just the Trekkies. So I think that's where Wrath of Khan really gets its praise.
I feel like we have to look at them in context of their series as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the Star Trek film series just is nowhere near as influential as the Star Wars film series. I feel like everything great about Star Trek comes from the TV series.
Star Trek II: Wrath of Khan is a fantastic gateway film into the world of Star Trek because it is like a very clear-cut story. You don't really need to know the characters before watching that movie. You get a bit of an introduction to everyone. I think these are the two biggest franchises. Wrath of Khan is the definitive Star Trek movie, whereas Revenge of the Sith is like a milquetoast entry to the saga.
I
You
think
know what? You sold me. Wrath of Khan goes up.
Terminator 2 Judgment Day up against Aliens. I think Aliens is just fine. I like that it takes this world that's created in this kind of suspense horror thriller set in space that is Alien and then kind of like flips it on its head and turns it into an action movie. James Cameron kind of does that again with Terminator 2, but does it so much better. And the action sequences in Judgment Day are way better than any action sequence in Aliens.
Whenever I think of Alien as a franchise, I think Aliens. I feel like it is definitely decent enough to not be completely ignored as some other entries in the franchise have been.
I don't remember anything from Aliens, and I have seen it multiple times. I'm picking Terminator, but
Okay,
my
thank
reason
you all. Anyway, we got Men in Black up against Hitchhiker's Guide to
Galaxy.
so. Who here has seen Hitchhikers?
I've seen Hitchhikers.
I have, and I've also read the book.
the lore of Men in Black, just how the universe is set up. All the aliens and stuff are really interesting to me, but they were able to make a really entertaining series for almost 4 movies. But yeah, the first one is definitely the best.
I would actually make a case that it's not the best.
Really?
I think Men in Black 3 is the best Men in Black movie.
Whoa.
I was
really?
going to say that actually.
That's
I
Holy
don't
shit.
want to say it's because it was the first movie I saw in the series.
but that's why.
Yeah.
Is it kind of places us earlier in that lore and also in the time when in real life the Men in Black and the Roswell and all of that kind of paranoia was at a peak, and it sets it in the 60s, and that's almost where I wish the original one was set. I just feel like Men in Black is a worse version of Ghostbusters,
I honestly, this is a hot take, but I like Men in Black a lot better than Ghostbusters.
and I think that's what we should do. I think Men in Black's moving on. We got Star Wars: A New Hope against The Matrix.
Yeah, I know this is a hot take, but I don't like The Matrix.
I have to agree. I never
Whoa.
got the big hype with The Matrix.
Star Wars is moving on. We're going to have to talk about it a lot more later. We've got Clockwork Orange against E.T.
2 very similar movies about an invader from another world coming into a family's home and shaking things up.
Yeah, I think Alex is one of the best like on-screen antagonists we've ever had. Like but it's not enough for me to say it's gonna move on from a classic like E.T.
Yeah, Kathleen Kennedy did such a good job producing E.T. I'm really glad they handed her Star Wars. All right, so we've got 2001: A Space Odyssey up against Interstellar.
Interstellar is like in my top 5 favorite movies. So, and like Odyssey is not.
Definitely think Interstellar is the more accessible and more traditional of the 2 films. It's got the narrative that goes on for the entire thing, like da 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 da. Whereas 2001 kind of has like almost like episodes, I would say.
At the same time, though, doesn't it feel like this is kind of Nolan trying to make his 2001 Space Odyssey?
Oh, it
Yeah.
definitely is.
Yeah, Interstellar had a like just physicist as a producer.
All right, 2001's moving on. Thank you,
Yeah.
Alden, for your great take. We got
Alien
Close
movie
Encounters of
time.
the Third Kind up against Signs.
I still haven't decided if I like Signs yet. The water twist is dumb. The flashbacks is kind of dumb. The baseball bat is dumb.
The way that Close Encounters of the Third Kind ends, I believe, leaves so much more of an emotional impact and so much more of like a positive kind of connotation with what alien life could be, despite the first 2 acts of the movie kind of setting it up like this is the end of days.
I feel like Close Encounters is easily the more important of the 2 movies.
The 2 people who haven't seen it say it's better, so we're going to go with Close Encounters.
Yeah, that is the metric that we're going by.
Up next, we've got Inception up against Looper.
Is that I believe it's pretty overhyped. Way less than what I expected it to be with how people talked about it.
I like the idea of Looper more than the actual movie itself.
In Inception, where they're both kind of like quote unquote grounded films that are more action heavy than they are sci-fi, but then have like a big sci-fi element as the catalyst for the action. Inception blows Looper out of the water.
Oh, yeah.
This one's interesting.
As much as I like Edge of Tomorrow, do we even talk about this?
Yeah, I mean, Back to the Future is moving on.
We got Blade Runner 2049 up against Mad Max Fury Road.
Every person that I've talked to thinks this is one of their favorite movies of the last decade, and I think it's all right.
I think it's up there for me. I
really don't see the hype. I think Blade Runner 2049 is miles ahead of
Mad Max Fury Road doesn't connect as much to the original Mad Max movies, whereas Blade Runner 2049 kind of takes the first movie and just, it doesn't try to like soft reboot it. It doesn't try to like make a new version of it. It literally is just a direct sequel that came out like 35 years later or something. And because of that, I think Blade Runner 2049 is the better movie. But visually, I think they're both very similar in terms of taking the concepts that the first movies and their respective franchises offer, and then like just cranking it to 11.
Cyberpunk is really big. It's something I really like the aesthetic of, but I would still prefer the aesthetic in Fury Road over Blade Runner.
I think personally, I would say Mad Max Fury Road is a better movie than Blade Runner 2049. I think that Blade Runner 2049 is a better sci-fi movie than Mad Max Fury Road. I think Blade Runner 2049 is a better sequel than Mad Max Fury Road. But I think as a whole package, I love Mad Max Fury Road. I'm one of those people that Josh is talking about would say that Blade Runner deserves to move on, as far as this list is concerned.
Blade Runner's moving on. We've got Boy and His Dog versus Akira. Where this movie thrives, I think, is in the twist and kind of in the tone that the film has with its talking dog that only the boy can hear. Way more interesting than the actions that take place in the movie, if that makes sense. The ideas that it has are better. And I think that's very similar to Akira, too, is the concepts that it brings to the table are a lot better than the movie itself.
I appreciate everything that A Boy and His Dog was doing and all of the influences that it had on other media that came about. And after seeing it, I can entirely see why. What it hits you with close to the end and the just out there and wild, especially considering what came before it. Definitely worth seeing. Main character the whole time is just trying to rape somebody, though.
Oh my god.
A Boy and His Dog, though, he doesn't know any better.
And then he eats her.
Okay, we're gonna talk about Akira now. Akira is like one of the few anime quote unquote properties that I enjoy. So let's just go with Akira.
Yeah, I would agree with Akira too, just for the sake that I've seen it multiple times and it's just mesmerizing to watch.
Predator up against Terminator. The protagonist and the antagonist travel back in time. The sci-fi elements are pretty limited.
I kind of disagree though, because I feel like the outcomes of what that main character does, where it's the creation of John Connor, really is an interesting take on time travel.
But is that interesting until after we see John Connor in Terminator 2? I feel like it's hard to judge this movie without comparing how much better its sequel is.
But yeah, I gotta agree with Nate here. I feel like it's almost like the Alien movies, whereas instead of Aliens being the more interesting concept pusher to Alien, it's T2 is the more interesting concept pusher to Terminator.
Yeah, I think we have the better Terminator moving. We'll have Predator take it for now. So we've got Primer up against Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Has anyone seen Primer?
I did not see Primer.
I have not.
No.
This is supposed to be Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. I thought
Yeah.
Rise was the second one.
I just want to point out Primer had a $7,000 budget.
Yes, it did. And it takes that budget to the next level.
Oh my god, are we out of the first round?
We are going to try our best to count down and just say which one we're picking, because that might
boy.
slow down the amount of debates we need to have. So 3, 2, 1.
Planet of the
Apes.
Apes. Okay,
All right, we
what's
got
next?
Blade Runner up
versus-
against Star Trek 2 Wrath of Khan.
Oh,
3,
God.
2, 1.
Blade
Runner.
Runner.
I'm glad I didn't say anything because I would have said Wrath of Khan.
All right, we got Terminator 2 Judgment Day versus
Men in Black.
ready? 3, 2, 1.
Terminator
Judgment
2.
T2.
We got Star Wars A New Hope up against E.T. Ready? 3, 2, 1.
Star
Star
Wars.
Wars.
Yeah, 2001 A Space Odyssey versus Close Encounter. Ready? 3, 2, 1. 2001.
2001.
Inception versus Back to the Future. Ready? 3, 2, 1.
Back
Back
to the
Future.
Inception.
Oh wait.
All right, we got Blade Runner 2049 versus Akira. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Blade
Blade
Runner
Runner
2049. All right, Predator versus Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. 3, 2, 1. Predator.
Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Finally, a debate. They're split. Rise is kind of like a really weird, like, it's a drama, but it has a few action sequences. Dawn is a
Mhm.
full-on, like, it's a war movie. And then War of the Planet of the Apes is like a Holocaust movie with monkeys.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird, but I like it. Dawn is hands down the best.
Dawn is easily the best one, yeah. Like Dawn takes place like while the humans are still kind of dying out.
I feel like I'm more intrigued by the concept of a planet that's already established to be ruled by apes and less of if the apes that are on our planet now decided to rebel. I like the way Predator is shot a lot more than I like the way Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is shot. There's just too many like wide shots of these CGI apes, and it's more of like a way to show off like how great visual effects has come. Whereas Predator relies so heavily on what you don't see, and the visual effects don't hold up at all.
I think that where Dawn does stand above Predator in that context, though, is Dawn isn't really a straight up action movie in the way that Predator is. There's still like you've still got the drama elements of like everything that's going on with the apes. Caesar's like having a son or what. Yeah, I feel like Josh would definitely pick Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. He didn't even like Predator that much.
Yeah, he tried to tell me that Terminator was better. And we're in round 3 now. We got Planet of the Apes up against the original Blade Runner. What's everyone picking?
Planet of the Apes.
I'm on Blade Runner.
I'm gonna say Blade Runner.
I'm also on Blade Runner. Planet of the Apes managed to like at least stand on how influential it was and being like one of the first great sci-fi movies. But I feel like when you sit it next to Blade Runner, who is also a titan of the genre, I feel like I have to go with Blade Runner.
The whole film, you're watching him as a character, and you feel bad for him. He loses his voice, and you're so frustrated with him. I remember like being like a fucking 11-year-old kid, like so frustrated for this guy, where he just wants to talk to these apes and communicate.
Just wanted to talk to the apes.
Planet of the Apes is perhaps one of the most pure sci-fi movies on this whole list, but Blade Runner is also like one of the best like noir movies as well. Despite being far removed from when that genre was popular and the aesthetics being compromised to blend with science fiction. But I feel like if you were to show someone who's at our age who has never seen either of these movies, they would laugh at the apes the moment they show up in Planet of the Apes, but they would probably be somewhat intrigued with Blade Runner all the way through because the visuals hold up a whole lot better.
But that's what I kind of love about sci-fi is you have these people that are like dressed up like fucking apes, and they still could touch on racism, religion, nuclear war, bringing in real life themes into a stupid fucking world when you like just think about it. It was when I think Planet of the Apes in the year 1968 was able to juggle those themes very incredibly well for the time.
The fact that they tackled what they did culturally, like with racism and all that, was pretty big, like really big, especially when it was released.
And I don't think there's a movie as socially ahead of its time as Planet of the Apes, and that pushed the genre as far as it did for its time. I really just think Planet of the Apes is a movie that was like 10 years ahead of its time or more and is really a masterpiece. So we're going to put Planet of the Apes moving on to the next round. We got Terminator 2 Judgment Day up against Star Wars A New Hope.
We talked about the cultural impact of the original Star Wars, and I think that's extremely fair, just what that did for the sci-fi genre.
It made it profitable.
Just the culture around the movie and the culture shift that came after the movie was huge.
The next round is 2001 A Space
Odyssey versus
Back to the Future. If I had to pick which movie between 2001 A Space Odyssey and Back to the Future are my favorite, I would probably say I appreciate 2001 more for what it achieves and what it is attempting to do. It is a far more ambitious movie, but in terms of am I going to sit down and watch that I can watch with my whole family, that people aren't going to be bored, Back to the Future is one of the most enjoyable movies of all time. It is arguably more enjoyable and more accessible than even that of Star Wars.
I could see where Nate's coming from, though. Like, a month from now, what movie am I probably going to remember more of? Probably Back to the Future. It's a really friendly watch compared to 2001 A Space Odyssey.
I also think that Star Wars succeeds where Back to the Future does, not as largely as a like wide net maybe, but I still think 2001 is just a better sci-fi movie than Back to the Future is. Back to the Future is definitely the more entertaining movie. I don't think there's any argument about that, but I'm sticking with 2001.
I agree with what Jory's saying, that Star Wars is kind of in that same space as Back to the Future. And if we're being completely honest here, 2001 is probably the best made movie on this entire list. We've got Blade Runner 2049 versus Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. 3, 2, 1. Blade Runner 2049. We've got the final four. We've got Planet of the Apes versus Star Wars A New Hope, and 2001 A Space Odyssey versus Blade Runner 2049.
This is like my finals of like my favorite movies. Like I fucking love both of these movies. Star Wars has the cultural impact. I don't think this is the best Star Wars movie. I think Star Wars evolved after this into something better.
But I think that says a lot about the lore that this film built. Is it was such a strong foundation to start a franchise. Really interesting elements that are touched on in Planet of the Apes, but in terms of science fiction, it's all about the world building. And there are encyclopedias upon encyclopedias of every little knickknack that shows up for the 10th of a frame in a Star Wars movie.
A New Hope, the more I think about it, should move on. Planet of the Apes, I'm glad it made it this far.
2001 A Space Odyssey versus Blade Runner 2049.
Would prefer Space Odyssey just because of what it represents for sci-fi.
There's still great sci-fi movies out there, and I think Blade Runner 2049 is phenomenal. It's already going down as one of the most slept-on movies in the past decade.
Blade Runner 2049, the biggest upset over 2001 A Space Odyssey, I think. So here it is, the two greatest science fiction movies of all time, Star Wars: A New Hope up against Blade Runner 2049. Blade Runner 2049 is actually my pick here, so I want to hear you nerds talk about Star Wars.
Alden, Jory, are you picking Star Wars?
Yes.
I am currently on the fence.
I am also on the fence. So how about Nate?
Think there's anything really in Star Wars that feels like, oh, humanity's going to get there at some point. But I think the best sci-fi has something to do with the human condition. I don't think anything in Star Wars really says anything about the human condition, at least in A New
Hope.
We don't know anything about a father-son relationship. We don't know anything about this overarching presence of family. We just know I've got to save the
Princess.
I look at any two movies as direct companions. It's Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. There's not a single movie you can add to Star Wars: A New Hope that makes it feel like a continuation of the story. Even if you just want to add Empire, then you're left on this cliffhanger like, holy crap, that's his dad? Well, I guess that's the end of this story. You know, there's not.
And you're definitely not going to add Rogue One.
So Nate and Alden have made their decision. So I think Jory and I have to break this.
Impossible to talk about them without the context of the original, because you're not meant to watch Blade Runner 2049 without watching the original. You're supposed to have seen it first. And it would be nice if it were a standalone thing, but it's just not. It's a sequel.
I think visually and sci-fi elements, I would have to agree Blade Runner.
Blade Runner 2049 is the best science fiction movie of all time. Let us know what your favorite science fiction movie of all time is in the comment section below. Was it on this list at all? Did we completely forget it?
Well, yes, because Paul wasn't on the list.